The year was 1944. Base Delta 9 was a humid, malaria-ridden outpost on the edge of a nameless island in the Bismarck archipelago. It wasn't a place of grand strategy. It was a swamp with a runway. The air was a permanent soup of rotting jungle vegetation, sulfur from a nearby dormant volcano, and the sharp, metallic tang of blood. Corporal Doc Miller was the soul of the base. While the pilots flew the missions and the engineers paved the coral, Doc lived in a tent marked with a fading red cross. He was 22, but in the flickering light of his kerosene lamp, his face looked 60. He didn't carry a rifle. He carried a heavy canvas bag filled with morphine, sulfa powder, and the prayers of 100 mothers. The jungle's breath life at Delta 9 was a slow war of attrition. If the Japanese didn't get you, the jungle rot would. The men lived in boots that never dried and slept in hammocks draped with mosquito netting that felt like spiderwebs. To stay sane, they traded stories of Sunday dinners in Ohio or the smell of rain on a Texas ranch. Doc spent his days treating heat exhaustion and infected coral cuts. But his real work began when the sun dipped below the canopy and the green ghost, the jungle mist, rolled in. "Doc, do you think we're ever getting off this rock?" asked a young private named Billy, whose fever was making him shake. Doc pressed a cool, damp cloth to the boy's forehead. "The planes are coming back tomorrow, Billy. And when they do, they're bringing mail and fresh quinine. You just worry about making it to sunrise. I'll handle the rest." The night of the crimson rain, one moonless Friday, the peace of the lagoon was shattered. A group of American transport planes, caught in a sudden tropical squall, had been forced to ditch in the shallow reefs just off the coast. The planes were carrying wounded men from the front lines at Rabaul. The base was plunged into chaos. The runway lights were flooded out, and the tide was pulling the wreckage toward the jagged volcanic rocks. "We can't get the boats out there," the sergeant barked. "The surf is too high, and the reef will rip the hulls open." Doc didn't wait. He grabbed his bag, tied a long coil of rope around his waist, and looked at the black, churning water. "I can swim the channel. I've got to get to them before the tide pulls them into the deep." The duel with the tide, Doc stepped into the ocean. The water was surprisingly warm, but it felt like a living creature trying to pull him under. He swam with a rhythmic, desperate stroke, his lungs burning as he swallowed salt water. The black lagoon was full of shadows, but he focused on the flickering red flare burning on the wing of the downed plane. He reached the wreckage just as it began to slip off the coral shelf. There were 6 men clinging to the fuselage, their faces white with terror. Doc didn't hesitate. He began triaging in the dark, his hands moving by instinct in the chest-deep water. He used his rope to create a lifeline between the plane and a sturdy mangrove root on the shore. One by one, he guided the wounded through the crashing surf, shielding their bodies with his own when the waves broke over them. On the final trip, a piece of jagged aluminum from the wing sliced deep into Doc's thigh. He didn't cry out. He gripped the last soldier, a kid even younger than he was, and kicked for the shore. His vision was blurring from the pain and the loss of blood, but he refused to let the ocean win. The dawn of the living, when the sun finally rose, painting the lagoon in shades of gold and violet. Doc was found slumped on the sand, still holding the rope. The 6 soldiers were alive, huddled in blankets under the trees. Doc's leg was bandaged by a frantic medic assistant. As he sat there, shivering despite the heat, the commander walked over. He didn't give a speech. He just knelt in the sand and handed Doc a silver whistle he had found in the wreckage. "You brought them home, Doc," the commander said quietly. "In the dark, you were the only light they had." Doc looked at the wounded men, then at the vast, silent ocean. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a man who had kept his promise to a boy with a fever. "I didn't bring them home, sir," Doc whispered, his voice raspy from the salt. "I just reminded them that home was still worth fighting for. The war eventually moved on, and Base Delta 9 was swallowed by the jungle vines. The runway turned back into a swamp, and the volcano remained silent. But in a dozen small towns across America, men would grow old telling their grandchildren about the angel of the Black Lagoon, the man who swam into the dark so they could see the dawn.